So this is just random. Start whenever you want, Marco. But I truly believe that, we can set this up in a little bit, but I got to get this out of my head. I truly believe that I have been, I have conditioned myself to get past those points. I will, I will recognize the negativity. I'll recognize the positivity, whether it's, for my wife or a news something or whatever, or a coach. I've always recognized it, but I do believe that I've conditioned myself to get past it because, when you hear that as a kid, I would sit there and dwell on that thing and it would overwhelm me. And I'd almost be paralyzed by it and be like, oh my gosh, what if I would say, what if they're right? Instead of saying, what if they're wrong? And that's where I kind of conditioned my brain to be like, I had a long conversation with somebody the other day and I was like, what was your motivation kind of thing? And my motivation was proving everybody wrong, saying, oh, you're not going to make it. Oh, you're not tall enough. Or you're not big enough. You're not fast enough. You're not this. You're not smart enough. I was always like that. I never really realized it until you're done and you look back and you're like, how the hell did I get here? And it was always because I always wanted to prove everybody else wrong kind of thing. And just kind of,
I think that's the competitive nature. That's what I'm saying. So the question that I asked was basically, is it your personality? Yeah. Is it your personality at the beginning of your life? Like, would you come out of the womb this way? Or is it something that you developed? And I think like anything, nature, nurture, it's both. And I think maybe you had a predisposition because when my wife said, my mom, and I was young, it was like, oh, you'd be a good lawyer. You can argue things. And I said, part of that was the stubbornness, like to try to prove people wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes you're naive, you're an idiot. You're like, oh, that's the wrong thing. And, you don't want to say you're right or you're wrong all the time. You learn quickly, or you think you have this worldly knowledge at 15, like dad, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And you're like, oh, I'm an idiot. But that mentality is the same mentality I had when I started playing. Like, oh, this guy throws harder than you and he's a better player than you. Well, we'll see about that, right? Or, a good example is I really wanted to go to Stanford. My dad went to Stanford Business School. I grew up in Palo Alto. I know, so sorry. Well, Milano wanted me to come to Cal 2 years too late. He's like, Tuttle, how come you didn't come to Cal? There you go. So I knew all those guys. But the stubbornness was that. So guess who helped me get on Team USA, right? Mark was one of the decision makers, right? So he's like, oh, yeah, Ron Polk's the coach and Mark Johnson from A&M. Like, hey, you got to see this guy on the West Coast. Because every time we played Stanford was exactly what you said. The mentality thing was like, you know what? I gotta prove that, they made a mistake, or I got to prove that I can compete on this level. And then that piggybacks on what we kind of started this conversation with, which is that's how you block out stuff, right? Because nothing else matters except, proving them wrong or being determined. And it's a weird mentality because people love Kobe and they love Michael Jordan. When those guys, it doesn't matter what they do off the court, they're like killers on the court. But if you're not as good as they are, but you have a killer mentality or that's your mindset, people are like, well, it's kind of false. Tuttle thinks he's Michael Jordan, but he's not, right? Or he thinks he's Nolan Ryan, but he's not. But you have to, damn well you have to have that mentality to get there.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. I'm like, it doesn't matter if you are or aren't. If you don't have that mentality, you're not going to overcome maybe some of your own shortcomings. Because I try and everybody's like, what was it like being a utility guy? What was it like being a role player? What was it like being the 25th guy on the roster? And I was like, I didn't show up every day thinking I was the 25th guy on the roster.
Exactly.
I legitimately, every single day I showed up, I went to the lineup card and I would go down it. I knew I wasn't playing when I showed up, but I still went to the card because I would go through it and be like, I still had this edge where I was like, dude, why am I not in the lineup? I should be in the lineup. But that impacted how I prepared for the game every day, and I was ready for every opportunity. But in my head, I knew I wasn't Michael Jordan, but I came to the field every day with the mentality of I'm gonna play like him, even though my opportunities were going to be limited.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic way to look at it. So this leads me to a topic that I wanted to ask you for a while. So 2 or 3 weeks ago, I want to say, when the Chiefs played the 17th game, was that week 18? I never know, with a bye and 17 games. It must have been week 18, right? Yeah. The Chiefs rested all their starters because they had already got the number 1 seed. The scuttlebutt around, and I think they asked specifically Travis Kelce on his podcast, but This is not going to be a Kelsey Mahomes podcast, even though both my topics center around that.
Well, and it's current. I mean, those big games yesterday as we record on Monday.
Ugh, yeah. But the question is, they were asking Travis, like, oh, well, you guys rested all your starters because you didn't want to see Joe Burrow and the Bengals. And I think this kind of goes to the Michael Jordan thing. It's a good segue. And I wanted to ask you, as a professional who won the World Series, and you were playing your former team, people will say, oh, well, yeah, you guys won it, but, he had a broken leg and, that guy was on the IL or whatever. And it's like, but you as a competitor, and I always say this too, and I mean this, like, I would rather face Murderers Row and have a chance to win the World Series. All right, it's Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth and, everybody like coming through. I'd rather face those guys than be like, oh, here's, Wally Pipp and here's this guy and then that guy. And right? Like I thought it was silly, but knowing the answer to that question, this really has not as much to do with Travis Kelce. I just think nobody that's been in the arena that competes at a high level would be like, oh, yeah, we totally sandbagged it so we didn't have to play the Bengals and Joe Burrow. Because guess what? You got to play the Houston Texans, and they almost ran you out of your own field, right? Without some of those calls. I mean, so you're never – I know, well, we can talk about that too. But you're never picking and choosing. I have a thought about that. That's my other topic. You're never picking and choosing your opponent. Bring it on. And you'll take all comers. And if those all comers happen to be injured or it's a COVID year like the Dodgers, right? You can have an asterisk. Like, it doesn't matter. That's the challenge of the year. That's the challenge of the moment. Bring it on. That's my mentality, and that's what I always figured. Like, that's a dumb question, right?
No, it's not a dumb question. It's something that needs to be asked because it gets asked every single year. But the fact that you answered it in your comment in just one word. You said moment, because it's in the moment. That's all you're playing for is in the moment. Every player that's ever taken the field has played in the present. And you don't, like I said, I knew I wasn't going to start every day, but I showed up like I was a starter every single day. When you go play a game, you don't go out and play a game going, man, we got Slappy Joe over here and Joe Bag of Donuts over here. We're going to kick their ass. It's like, you never, did you ever, I never showed up like that. I mean, there was expectation to win, but it was always if we play our game as good as we are, we're going to smoke these fools.
Yep.
And that's usually how it worked out because we went in there with the mentality of we're playing against the A team. We got our A team. We're going to go get you guys. But I don't think anybody's pulled players or tanked a game because of who they don't want to face or who they want to face or anything like that, because there's so many variables that are out of your control, and that'll probably lead into your referee talk with the Chiefs. But, I don't think that anybody's ever rolled into that. I think it's actually football's – and you got to take every sport for what it is too. Basketball's a grind. Baseball's a grind. The Astros rest guys. I played on both the White Sox and Padres and Diamondbacks that went to the playoffs. We rested guys down the stretch, skipped starts to make sure that guys were healthy and ready for the postseason.
Yep.
I didn't play in this current wild card era where you get the bye potentially in the first round. So that wasn't even a thought. You just kind of knew that you were trying to line things up for that first division series. But I don't think that we ever rested guys on purpose to say we're tanking or we don't want to face anybody. I think it was more of a strategic in-house, how do we get ready for the postseason?
Yeah. No, I mean, so that's always a topic too. Do you rest guys or whatever? I guess what I'm just saying is the thing that stuck out to me, and I don't know, like you said, it gets asked all the time. I wish you could explain it to someone where it doesn't have to get asked all the time. I mean, no competitor, right? You live in the moment, and you've seen it. I see it with my daughter's soccer games or flag football games or any competitive environment that they're in. And you've heard this before. It's like you play down to the level of your opponent or you play up. Like there is a kind of an emotional thing that gets attached to it. And we talked about your young mindset where you would take things personally or maybe you dwell on it. That's the growth period right now of watching young athletes kind of get into where it's like, hey, you can't play down to your opponent. You got to show up every day ready for the opportunity and ready for the challenge. I just think we just got to get past asking these same questions. I think the answer's there, which is nobody's dodging anybody. And actually, if you raise your level and you had to play the Bengals and you beat them, you're probably more more ready for the next challenge or the opportunity, right? Like, beating the Bills
100%.
yesterday in a close game. So I do not have a lot to say about the referees, but I do, and this will be a question, not a statement. I think football, Troy Aikman kind of agrees with me, I believe. We can call him on the phone and ask him. We know that it's a quarterback game. It started with Tom Brady. Like, they want the quarterbacks to be protected. Yeah. They're protected at all costs. I get that. I like that. I like the offensive structure of the game. I mean, Jared Goff took a mean hit in that game.
Dude.
Whether they call a penalty or not, like, you do not want your quarterback
that they got him on. Woo.
Ooh, you do not want your quarterback to have that and then try and get out there and make calls. So my thing is, I believe with soccer and basketball, you get a yellow card for diving in soccer, like the guys that fall trying to get the PK, and then in basketball you get the flop rule. So you're in and the guy's backing you down and you flop. Like, there is a penalty for that. You get a foul for that. Like, nope. Yeah, and so why can't we institute that in football? That's all I'm saying. So this has nothing to do with a specific game, but there should be a flop rule on quarterbacks, right? I mean, quarterbacks should have the same. I mean, we witnessed a couple of flops, right? We witnessed those. Why can't you just go, okay, that's a flop? Like, you weren't hit. That's a flop.
Well, I mean, football's replaying literally every play now by review. So,
but they didn't overturn that. There was friendly fire on the one hit, so the Houston guys crushed each other
so bad,
and they fell on Mahomes, and that was a penalty. So that was
a whole
bad.
other.
But
how do you pick and choose what you're going to review and overturn? I think that's where you kind of open Pandora's box to. Well, if we do it for this, we got to do it for that, and like you just said. Flops are obvious to, like, I never played football, and I see flops all the time. And it's not just, I almost said, oh, you're only saying that because Mahomes did it against the Texans. But
no, I see it all the time.
You can see it all the time with, offensive linemen or a guy that, gets in their face and kind of, they headbutt each other or they maybe give a shove and the guy did
you see it yesterday? Down. Yesterday at the end of the Chiefs game.
Yes.
Yeah, who was it? Was it the Bills? Oh no, it was the Redskins guy. Towards the end of the game.
How
the
dare you? They're Commanders.
Remember? Yeah, but he was like, ugh.
Yeah, they're like they throw the arms up and
Redskins.
They're like,
yeah. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. I mean, I've said Indians several times on broadcasts. I mean, they're the Guardians, Commanders,
yes,
Guardians, Commanders.
So the Commanders, I got it. But anyway,
that
guy flopped and he was mad at himself for not. He didn't look hurt. He looked more mad that they didn't call a penalty, even though the game was out of hand. Did you see that guy be honest or whatever? He was like, oh. Yeah. But I just think they should institute a flopping rule. That's all I'm saying, because they are now doing that
you gotta clean that
review.
Up. You can't.
They're doing the automatic review. So they're not waiting to throw the flag. They're doing some spot reviews. They're doing throw a flag, something. I don't know.
Yeah. What was there any flopping in how do you flop in baseball? Is there flop?
There's not flopping. The thing I can think of is guys like running to first base and stepping weird or like pulling a hammy, and they call timeout and they kind of limp around over there, and then they get on first base and steal second. You're like, come on, dude! Like, we just had a 10-minute break for you to do that. Well, that's to me that's flopping-ish.
Well, like when you and I played, we didn't have replay, so it was like all about how the umpire, and as well as I do, swipe tags, phantom double plays. You'd be at the plate and there'd be a pitch on the inside, and you're like, oh, and you're like, that got me.
Or if it hits your bat handle, right? The bat handle,
and you're like,
the knob. Like my hand, I broke my finger. You take a swing and it hits the dirt 4 feet in front of home plate, but you jump around it hits you in the foot. You're like, that's funny.
They're like foul ball, and you're like, yes. Yeah. That's my be the only flop. You guys got that down.
So those are the equivalent, and I guess with hitters, like, what pitchers don't flop.
Can't flop.
Anyway,
you guys are screwed.
That's funny. Anyway, so I just think they should institute a flop rule. I mean, it's pretty easy to see. If 90 million people watching a game can see that there was a flop.
Yes.
Or to Troy Aikman's point, this is what I started with. When you run to the sideline, and you're kind of moving around, and then you slide or you drop down really quick, and guys are coming at you as fast as they can. There's got to be some sort of, I know.
But you talked about the protection for the quarterback.
I already said it.
Yeah, but it's protection for the quarterback, which we get because they're investments, they're high profile, they're the offense, all this stuff. We show up and we want to watch Allen versus Mahomes, all this stuff. But there's got to be a little bit of protection for the defense because as soon as that dude leaves, like the quarterback, for instance, leaves the pocket and they say he becomes a runner, then as a defender, how do I stop when this guy all of a sudden, I don't know when he's going to decide to slide or what is intended to be a slide.
Correct.
So, yeah,
and some
it's
of those
tough.
slides aren't slides. They kind of start forward and then they drop down.
Yeah, and they're
they don't know how to slide like a baseball player.
That's true.
I don't. Troy Aikman said it. He goes, you can't just run around, dance around, and then drop down and then be like, oh, penalty. Like, it just shouldn't, I don't know. It just shouldn't be. That's all.
Because you go to juke a guy and you can't juke him, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to fall down.
Yeah, right. That doesn't. Anyway, I just didn't like it. So I don't know if you want to carry that on with the refs because I think you and I always agree. We've said this before. You know what the strike zone is at the beginning of the game. It might be horrible, but you know what it is. And so be horrible the whole game, and that's fine. So I know how they're going to call this game, and I adjust as a player, a professional. And that's the extent I always say. So do I think Mahomes got the benefit of the doubt on some of those calls? I do. But, I mean, when has he not gotten those calls? And, some of them were bad calls, too. I'm not saying that you should be ready for it, but I don't think anybody's like, oh, the Chiefs.
Let's approach it like this because, people have watched enough baseball. We've played enough baseball. We've watched a ton of sports. I don't know exactly how many plays happen in a football game every day, but it's got to be 50 or 60 on each side of the ball. So you've got, as an offense, I've got 50 plays. On defense, we've got 50, 60. And I think Tony Romo said it best. You can't pre-snap, post-snap fouls you've got to cut down on in order to win in the playoffs. But
I like that.
But the plays that we're talking about, how many there was one or two. There was a roughing the passer in the Texans game, and then there was when Mahomes slid, and they called that penalty. And then you go to the Bills game, and it's that first down that the Bills were going for that maybe they got, maybe they didn't get. They obviously ruled in favor of the Chiefs. But between two games, you've got 240 plays. What are we talking about? 3 plays. So what about the other 237 plays that were out
based
there?
On that math,
Yeah. So I mean, and that's where I kind of get caught up. I'm like, and I thought the Texans, D'Amico Ryans handled it well, saying we had opportunities, we missed them. You've got to beat the team. The refs maybe didn't go our way, but we had to beat the team. And then I look at that play last night with the Bills, and dude, you're running a play that everybody knows you're running, and it got beat earlier in the game. Why are you doing it again right there? It seemed like an opportunity. I'm not an offensive coordinator, but
no. I
could have set these dudes up and maybe gone around the edge or handed the ball off to Cook, who's been doing extremely well. Because I think the offensive line for the Bills was better than the defensive line for the Chiefs.
I agree last night.
I still go down to choice, and you've got to make the play. Don't leave it in the hands of the refs or the umpire.
Yeah. And I thought they did a good job of that most of the game. The Bills did. But, Josh Allen said almost what you said and what D'Amico Ryan said, which is to be the champs, you got to beat the champs. And that's why they had, home field advantage. So I guess the piggyback on that that I had, and like I said, I didn't want to make this about Kelsey and Mahomes, but I think if we bring it back to baseball and the Astros, we got a little Astro fatigue, which is why people jumped on the garbage can and all this.
I'm glad you're bringing this up. Yeah.
Is they were so good right? Remember, they were terrible, and AJ was the manager, and they lost 100 games, and they won 100 games like 3 years later, I want to say 2 years later, something like that, through drafting and a really good core group of guys with Altuve and Bregman, etc. So now you got this, and then people, they were in the World Series 3 years in a row, and they won, they were in 4 ALCSs, and you're like, all right, I'm so friggin' tired of the Astros, and you work for them, but it's like, I don't want to friggin' see the Astros in the in the NLCS anymore. So I think that's where we're at with the Chiefs. Because my daughter is playing flag football, and she's like, as long as Mahomes doesn't win today, she's happy. And I think because they're a good team, and Andy Reid is very likable, but man, they would pop up the State Farm commercial, and you're watching them say, the rope-a-dopey or the okie dokie and whatever, and you're like, yeah, fumble-rooski, thank you. I'm like, I do not want to see, any of this. So I think it's fatigue, and I'd love for you to chat about, because you got to respect the best players in the game, and I think we all do this, but, right? So many people hated Tom Brady after it was like 5 Super Bowls and 6 Super Bowls, right? And they hated it. So we were sick and tired of Belichick's press conferences and them winning all the time. I think we've reached that threshold for the Chiefs because we're not lifelong Chief fans, but I was not excited to see the Chiefs win yesterday. I'll just say it like that. And then can you compare that to the Astros? What do you got?
Dude, this is hilarious. And again, I mean, this is probably why we're really good friends, because our minds are in the same place. Excuse me, but I did the same thing. The end of the game came around, and I think, that call gets overturned and the Chiefs go. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, dude, if he's behind in the fourth quarter in the playoffs, you might as well just mail it in. I mean, if he's within a touchdown, he's going to score. Trey Wingo had a stat out there. I can't repeat it verbatim, but he went to Tom Brady, Drew Brees, and some of these playoff quarterbacks, and he said the NFL average is right around 40% of converting some of those drives into winning drives. And he said there's only one guy that's perfect, and it's Patrick Mahomes. He's 7 for 7.
Wow.
And I was blown away. And then but to your point, I'm the same guy. I'm like, man, I would love to see somebody knock off the Chiefs. So I'm watching the game, and Allen's doing his thing. There's a couple of unsung heroes. Holland's making a couple of great plays, and then Dalvin Cook's having the game he's having. And I'm like, oh man, these guys look like they've really got a chance, and they don't end up winning. And I'm sitting there on the edge of my couch, and I'm just looking at him, going, man, he won again. And then they flashed up, 7 straight, maybe 7 or 8 straight championship title. What are they in the AFC?
Yeah, AFC. Yep.
AFC title games, and I'm going, that's a weird number. That's how many times the Astros went to 8 championship series, and then they're like 3 of the last 4 Super Bowls they've showed up, and obviously this is 3 in a row for them now. And I'm going, oh dear God, I had this light bulb moment where I went,
that's funny.
I'm watching. This is how people feel watching the Astros.
Thank you.
They just find
finally
ways
you
to win.
Understand it, Blum. I've been trying to convince you all this time. You're such a
it's
homer.
The truth, though.
No,
it's agonizing. You're like, son of a man. I'm like, dude, our team is rad. Look at us. We win. Woo-hoo. And now I'm like, son of a bitch. I'm like, there it is.
Yeah,
I figured it out. I feel it.
Yeah. And it is hard to keep that. You and I've talked about this before, the mentality, the edge that you have to keep to be good. Oh. Most of those things are mental. People always ask, like, oh, how do you get to be the tip of the spear? I said, you got to have both the mental and the physical. But the mental is much more trying. Like you said, you showed up every day hoping to be in the lineup and thinking of yourself as an everyday starter. So guess what? You had batting practice every day. There you are, 1 p.m. There, you're over from the hotel. You have lunch. You take BP. You do extra BP. You're switch hitter. So I'm gonna, the starting pitcher's right-handed tonight. I'm gonna work on my left-handed, drag bunts, and I'm gonna take extra ground balls. And you do this every day. That gets really mentally taxing when you're not able to show your wares. And I think you can relate that to the fatigue that fans feel. And, it's really amazing, to your point about Mahomes and the Astros, or the Chiefs and the Astros, how many years they've been on top.
Man.
And how challenging it is.
I mean, you can say dynasty. You can argue that also as well. I agree. But I think it's a dynasty-type situation. How about, let me ask you this. If you are the Chiefs, if you're the Lakers, Boston Celtics back in the day, the Golden State Warrior, you're State Warrior guy. These teams that go out, even the Patriots too. These dominant dynasty type teams.
The Niners when I was growing up, by the way.
The Niners, yeah, but so when you're at the tip of the spear, like you're saying, you're always in the lead, so the target's on your back. But there's also 95% of the fan base in that whatever industry you're in hates you. is there part of being a champion that has to enjoy being the enemy or being the heel? Like you've got to embrace the fact that everybody freaking hates you. And like, that's got to be, there's a small motivating factor in that.
Yeah. So this goes, I think, back to what we said about your personality that develops. You used to take this stuff personally, you know, like, oh, you know, they said I'm not big enough, or I need to be a switch hitter, or I don't hit the ball far enough, or I don't throw hard enough. All of that you take personally. So I do think, and this is the Jordan Kobe comment, was when you get to a certain spot, then it's, you know, I mean, you've heard this before, it sounds cliche, but it's me against the world or us against the world, because you do need some motivation. Hey, we've won 3 out of the last 4 Super Bowls, or we won 3 out of the 4 last World Series. You kind of have to say, hey, this locker room is the truth. Like we have to be on our game, and you know, whether you actually literally have a target on your back, you have to be at the top of your game most nights, and you have to find a way, as you know, to be motivated to do that, because once you win, it's really hard to keep it up. The other thing to that, I really like that question. The other thing to that is we're already, even if the Chiefs win, right? So Mahomes will have 4 Super Bowls and Tom Brady will have 7. And I remember before Joe Montana, he was 4-0, and they were like, "Oh, Joe Montana's the greatest player to ever walk the face of the earth. Like he was the best quarterback in the NBA." That stuff was all fine and dandy, but it took a while for Tom Brady to take that threshold. If Pat Mahomes wins this Super Bowl, they're going to say he's right on target with Tom Brady. He still has to win 3 more. I just don't like that I know, but I don't like that we want to knock the other guy off the throne so quickly. I mean, Tom Brady became the GOAT, like, I think when he won number 5 or 6. So he's been the GOAT, let's say, for 5 years, maybe. Like, the GOAT is the greatest of all time. Like, how quickly do we want to, all right, that GOAT is no longer the GOAT. We want a new GOAT. Pat Mahomes has a lot of work to do, right?
Yeah. Well, I would think, but still, don't you kind of give Tom Brady a little bit more credit, because he wasn't a number 1 pick. He didn't come out and just immediately become the quarterback start. You know, they had to develop a franchise that made Tom Brady better, whereas Patrick Mahomes came in and he was gifted. You know, he was a number 1 pick. He had the accolades, he had the pedigree, he had the talent, and they've just maximized everything they've done over there. But, you know, I still think that Tom Brady, and dude, I mean, this is looking way too far ahead. But you're going to lose DeAndre Hopkins, probably, you know, Schuster Smith. I mean, some of these guys are aging out as maybe Patrick Mahomes is heading into his peak, so to speak, in the late 20s, early 30s. Whereas, you know, this is going to be a test for the Kansas City Chiefs organization to keep him up there, because the Patriots and Bill Belichick kept Tom Brady up there for that long. I mean, that's what's going to be incredible, because you do have to give the organization some credit to keep Tom Brady at that level, even though there was turnover in the roster.
Yeah, the stars have to align. That's what I'm saying. And you and I have said this before. True. You need the general manager and ownership, and you have all these guys. Like, I mean, the way the Chiefs won this year without any superstars, like they got Pacheco and Kareem
love
Hunt.
Their adaptability.
Right.
I mean, but that's Andy Reid. I think he's done unbelievable.
And that's what bodes well for them, right? And even now they're playing guys like Kelsey. They're saying he's getting older, but Kelsey can do it for a couple more years. But you have Watson as the tight end. They have a couple other guys. So I'm not worried about that. I guess what I'm saying is, even if Mahomes wins this year and next year, the Super Bowl, and he's got 5 already in 6 years or whatever they got, that's still too short of Tom Brady, and
100%.
So you can give him all the accolades, but don't give him the GOAT status. I mean, this is the argument they have in basketball all the time. Michael Jordan has still not been knocked off the throne, and I don't know why, but I have a feeling. Like, look, LeBron James has been doing this for 20 years. He's incredible. He's won the NBA championship with multiple teams. He's 6'8". He's dominant. He's now 40 and he's still dominant. I don't love LeBron James. I'm not saying he's the greatest of all time, but people have like LeBron James is the 3rd greatest player of all time behind Michael and Kobe, or like Michael and Kareem, or it's like, well, what could LeBron do to become the GOAT? I don't think he's ever going to knock. Nobody seems to ever be able to knock Jordan off. Whereas I feel like people are so itching to put Patrick Mahomes in the GOAT status. Like they can't wait to slide Tom Brady. I don't know. That's what I'm asking. Do you have that feeling, or is that just me?
I never thought about it until now. But I mean, because like you said, Tom Brady isn't
Right
that
now
far
he
removed.
has
What, he's
3.
2 or 3 years
he has
from
3, and Brady
Yeah.
has 7. That, I mean,
And I don't
he's not even
care-
halfway there.
Yeah, and I don't care if you've done it quicker. You know, that should have nothing to do with it. It's the overall. You know, Brady put the bar way in the hell up here.
Yeah, I know.
And I mean, I know Mahomes is kind of
and
sped
the last
up.
one with Tampa actually gets him even a little more credence, right?
I was to say that gives him a lot more street cred for me because that team wasn't nearly as good as the previous 6. But I mean, I understand that the bar's up here, you know, way up there with Tom Brady. But Patrick Mahomes is like on the, you know, he's in the fast lane getting there, but he's still not there.
No. Okay.
And I mean, you can compare Mahomes at 29 to Brady at 29, whatever.
Yeah,
I
know.
get that, but it just still doesn't say that he's better than Tom Brady. You can't knock him off the horse that quick.
Well, people love to argue with statistics, and I'm fine with that. I'm just talking about the feeling. The feeling seems like we want to get rid of Tom as the GOAT, whereas in basketball, Jordan just stays there. Like nobody, like Jordan is in this spot. No, it's weird. Like why? I mean, Jordan was 6'6", and what he did was great. But I love Michael Jordan. This is not a. I just don't know why it's like he's untouchable. Like nobody. Is it because he did the shoe thing before everybody? I don't know. I don't know.
No, it's
you
because
tell me.
You want to know my gut first take, and this is a whole other. He played defense. He played both sides of the basketball. You know, he played offense, defense. He was defensive player of the year so many times and then still put up 40 points. So that's why I give him a little more credence. And obviously he took some lesser teams to the championship and won with them. But, you know, it's crazy. It's crazy how quick we are to try and put him on that pedestal instead of recognizing everything that Tom Brady did.
Yeah. And maybe, I mean, they almost lost to the Niners one year. They almost lost. Anyway, almost losing doesn't matter. The Niners with Garoppolo were up on them, and then the Niners last year were up on them. And, you know, again, giving Mahomes the ball in overtime, you're asking for trouble. So you got to be up a couple of scores. But, you know, Saquon Barkley and the way the line, they shoved it down people's throats. I would normally say I don't love Sirianni. I like Andy Reid. But the Bills, if they give you the template and now you're not playing in 20-degree weather or 15-degree weather, dude, I think Saquon and the Eagles, I feel like if they can run it, because you're talking about the Chiefs line, watch out for the Eagles running the ball down the Chiefs' throat, because then it doesn't matter whether you're blitzing or you got Spagnuolo back there, like trying to make the quarterback make all these thoughts. They're going to run it. They're going to try to run it down the Chiefs' throats, and I think they have a really good chance to win. As a matter of fact, I'm taking the Eagles plus the points.
Ooh, I like it.
Take it to the bank.
Yeah. I'm a novice offensive coordinator, but I know in the second half for the Bills, the way they got back in that game was running it.
Yep.
I mean, they dominated the line, and Dalvin Cook was running right through those guys. And I mean, the first scoring drive in the second half, I think were 7 or 8 running plays in a row before they eventually punched it through. So I think you're exactly right. And Saquon, dude, wow. Yep. What a beast that dude is. Yeah.
Well, he's a beast, but that's their strength. So anyway.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, and they maximize strengths. You know, and I think that it's going to be a good game, but I like your call with the Eagles. I think they might shock the world if they're able to get that running game going. Let me ask you something. You had a pretty significant, and I don't know if you want to talk about this or not, but I'm just curious.
That's fine.
Because we're older. I had a significant back injury surgery a year ago, and you went through a knee surgery, and you recently, I'm assuming you got cleared to be able to be human again.
Yeah, I did. I'm 5.5 months post-surgery, yeah.
Damn. So how much of your athletic baseball playing background helped you get through this process here at this age that we are in now where, you know, other people might be handling it differently? Do you think any of your athletic history helped you kind of navigate and get through this?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So I think this is Thomas Edison. Good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment, I think is how that goes. But no, it's so true. So first of all, I feel like because, and we've talked about this before, I mean, I got into CrossFit like 10 years ago, which is whatever. It doesn't have to be called CrossFit, but like boot camp and just staying active and all of that stuff is super important. But being in shape before I got hurt certainly helped a ton. The other thing is getting hurt and having rehabbed before, which you have done, like you had surgery here, you have surgery on your wrist. You kind of know the process and the routine. And then the other added little ingredient, which is great, is with age comes a little, I wouldn't say humility, but like I'm not trying to get back to something, like I'm not trying to get back on the field. I'm just trying to get back to normal. And my wife would tell you, she goes, man, I mean, 2 months later, I mean, aside from the knee brace, like she's like, it's like you were never hurt, which is pretty good. So yeah, the mentality of PT, right? Physical therapy, the mentality of, oh, all right, this is what the timeline requires. It all helps for sure. And if you've ever been to rehab or you've hurt yourself, you're kind of like, oh yeah, I got to go through this process. I mean, the guy still leans on my knee, bends my knee, all that kind of stuff, and stretches it.
Range of motion.
Yeah, range of motion. I think I might have told you before, but when I hurt my shoulder in college, I was going to PT, and there was a lady who had blown out her knee next to me. She was like, well, she was our age now, which was old when I was in college. I was like, there's this old lady sitting next to me.
This old bag of bones like over here.
Yeah, right. And now it's the same age
us.
we are. So there you go. So, 55-year-old lady. And, the PT guy would be like, have you been doing your exercises, Marge? And Marge is like, a little bit. And he would lean on that knee, and she would make the worst noise ever. She'd be like, oh, and I'm like, oh God. Like,
she's
so I know. So he was like, not really doing your exercises. So having never wanting to make that noise and all of that. Yeah, I think I can't necessarily attribute it to baseball, but the stuff that we've been through, to your point at the beginning, where you had back surgery and all that. Yeah, I mean, I think it gives you a little perspective about the timeline, and then you kind of know what you have to do, just like baseball, grinding it out. Just do something every day. Like, oh, I got to do this. I'm not going to sit around and feel sorry for myself today. I got to get up and walk around or whatever. So, anyway,
no, but I think I was just going to say it takes it's a certain patience, in being able to understand that this is going to take time, but it's more of an aggravated patience because you want it to happen quickly. But understanding that patience is one thing, and I think the other aspect is work ethic, because you just kind of nailed it with that lady you were talking about, that fossil that had her knee issue years back. Didn't have the work ethic to speed up the process. And I think that's where your mentality of being an athlete before was like, even though I'm hurt, doesn't mean I completely shut it down. It means I've got to work a little bit harder to get back and be ready to compete again. But I also like, for those of you who are listening, who are a little bit elderly like us, is Tuttle said, I was in shape before I got hurt. And I think that has a lot to do with it too, because I kind of went into my back surgery. I was like, I remember specifically, like 2 months before my surgery, I go, can I hurt it any worse? And he kind of said, you'd have to do something extreme. So he's like, basically, no. So I went into the gym and I started just throwing plates on, and I was like,
nice.
I was doing, it hurt, but I knew that I was getting myself ready to go into surgery. And I think that's a really good point.
That's the baseball mentality. That's the thing about being in shape. And as we get older, I mean, which is kind of when we had started this podcast as being cathartic and or commiserating and all of that stuff. I think, health and wellness is super important. I saw a post the other day. I've reduced, I guess TikTok got banned and I was never on X after it went from Twitter to X. So Instagram's kind of my only social media inroad, and I don't get on there very often. But there was a guy talking about doing hard things, right? And we've heard this before, like do something hard, it makes the rest of the day easier. But he actually talked about, and this reminded me of baseball, like when you do something that makes you feel good, there's an automatic reflex that after you do something that makes you feel good, you're going to have some period of not regret, but it's the dopamine stuff. So you feel good,
the endorphins
but then, it's like a regression to the mean. Then you're going to have something that you're like, oh, I don't feel as good when I did that, which is why you want to do it again, right? This is the old like, that shot of whiskey was great. Now I want to do it again, and that kind of thing. But the same thing happens if this is your midline and you do something really hard, like I really don't want to do that, you get that push to feeling better. And this is why doing difficult things or keeping yourself in shape or challenging yourself, I always find it makes the rest of the day easier because you already did this difficult thing. If you're always living in the easy world, then somebody says, hey, you got to lose 30 pounds, or hey, you got to stop eating, ice cream every night, or it's really difficult. So it's kind of you have to have a mindset, and that goes back to the surgery thing where, yeah, I'd like to beat the timeline. So he said, you're going to be 100%, I think 7 to 9 months. So I'm 5.5 months, and now he took the training wheels off. Now, he didn't say 5.5 months, now you can run a marathon, but he said kind of as needed, like start doing things that allow you to feel good and start doing things that you can do. So I don't know if that's trust because he knew that I was a former athlete, but same as you.
I just think, I think if you put him on this podcast and said, why did you say that to David Tuttle? He'd be like, because of your history.
Yeah,
100%.
maybe.
No, I
because
I
of what you said. You don't
that.
want to let somebody like, all right, you're good to go now, and they come back in a month later like, oh, doc, I blew out.
And the doctor knows that you're not going to go out there and run 10 miles tomorrow.
Right.
or try and, deadlift, some ridiculous number, get back to where you were at.
Maybe.
He understands that you understand. You know what I mean?
I hope he does.
Yeah.
But
No, he
anyway,
does.
So, yeah, but
I mean, we could be
agree.
talking next week after you try and flip 48 tires, but.
That's right. No, but feeling good. And, I almost feel like I would like to say I almost feel like I'm back to normal, whatever that was. But I don't know.
Yeah, but it starts with quality of life. Can you walk around?
Ago?
Can you stand up?
Yeah.
Can you get up the stairs?
Yeah.
Can you, stuff like that? And then you're like, in 2 months, then you're like, okay, I'm going to get back in the gym and try and feel this thing out. But you know your body better than anybody.
Yeah. You're a year post-surgery and you're golfing, I'm assuming. Are you doing everything normal as well?
It's like I went from I want to play golf, but it hurts so bad. Now I'm like, oh, man, I can't wait to play tomorrow. I can't wait to do this. And all of a sudden it's really? My energy level's back.
When did that happen? Was that?
Oh, it was a year. It was
okay.
a year. I mean, I'm still not to a year, but let's say 10 months. Mm-hmm. Like this month, January, I finally felt like I was like, oh, okay, I got this. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
But it took me. I was the same way. Like 6 months before I was like cleared to be able to
do stuff.
Do stuff.
Peloton it.
Oh man, I don't know. Peloton. I'm probably not going to get a Peloton ad, but I don't know if that had something to do with it.
What do you? What? Oh, with
just
your
being
back
in that
injury?
bent over position, riding a bike, man. It's probably not big for my Neanderthal ass.
That's funny. All right. Well, we did not record 2 segments. We just rambled, which is what is the fun part about this. And we'll get Mark to cut this up however he wants.
Yeah.
There's a couple questions in there. Slice and dice.
All right, dude. Good talking with you. David Tuttle on that end. Geoff Blum on this end. This is Endless Blummer. Good talking to you.